everyone is driving to a state which is the net zero 2030. However, it's communicated out of a fear base of the destruction of the world and moving. And so it's impacting people's anxiety levels because they're nothing. Wow, if that happens by 2030, we're in trouble.
Hi, Harvey. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. I've been super excited to invite you on because it was our conversation we had before Christmas that inspired this whole podcast. So thank you for the co-creation.
It was lovely, meeting you for the first time, and instantly we got into a deep conversation about change, which was something that was really close to my heart, which is amazing. And what you've done now and taking it forward to podcast and exposing is awesome. So really a topic that's close to my heart as well. Absolutely.
No, well, I'm so pleased. Before we get into our conversation of change, Harvey, I would love for you to share with people listening or watching, just to tell people a little bit about yourself, what you do, a bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. Well, originally from the UK and then lived most of my day in South Africa, and recently come back through to UK and set up businesses here. And I'm daily involved in the creative space and growing businesses. I have a small medium enterprise which grows businesses, and again, it's also preparation for change in business. So it also comes into business, and very inspired to look at the creative side of how businesses can grow. That's fundamentally what we do. We deal with a lot of tech, and we deal with creative art and design as well, and touching specifically in the marketing space, so that we look at it from a marketing growth perspective. Yeah. And that is inspiring, and there's lots of changes, different industries, different companies, different people. At the end of the day, it's almost we're managing people with their journey. So really inspired and see lots of that. And I share the change principle with them all the time. Beware, there's change coming, and that's called growth. And are you ready for it? So there's other avenues of seeing how change will change the business even. So yeah, that's my day, and very exciting.
Yeah. No, and that comes across as you explain that, right? You obviously love what you do, and it's part of who you are. And I know when we first spoke, that was evident too, right? And so it's that like energy attracts like energy. People who are passionate about what they do. That makes total sense. So thank you for sharing that with us. So change. You kind of very much posed the point that change changes you, and there planted the seed in, oh my God, that's so simple yet so powerful. You mentioned before a little bit about your kind of epiphany moment that you had around change. Do you want to maybe speak to that?
Yeah, sure. It was change that happened in my life, or I was seeing change on so many different variables. I was seeing it in business, in my own personal space in business. I was seeing it then once I was married and saw the change that happened into marriage. I then saw it through with children, having birth of our children, and then also seeing them as they're getting older. And it suddenly dawned on me that I really need to share what is coming. And the only thing that I could really sum it up to was there's going to be change coming. So be aware, change will change you. And it was that simple that I even went, oh, wow, that's right. There's going to be change coming. And it can be positive or negative. It can be physical, it can be mental, it could be familial, it could be relational. But just be aware, something's on the horizon, it's going to change. And you might not be what you were before, or the person you're with might not be the same as they were, or the instance might be different, like your business has grown out of control to a positive, So I think the inspiration that came from myself was just having seen these changes, my kids getting to the point where now Michael is 22 and my daughter Gemma is 19. And I really want to just give them a little handbook and say, by the way, be aware, change will change you. Here's a few instances in people's lives where these changes have happened. And then I thought, well, the best way to do that is to speak to as many people as I can and say, what was the biggest change in your day? And so that you hear these instances. And again, I heard so many repetitions of things that people have said. And from a positive, negative, and I'll share a relational, which is, when I met you, you were so different. Wow, you've changed. So there's a statement that came out. And I thought, of course, well, you're not expecting that. Or, you moved your positions from a senior manager to CEO of the company. And then people are saying, wow, you've changed so much. Well, the role determines change, and I have to, if I'm embracing that, which is positive, but then it might have had other impacts and consequences. And if you're prepared for those things, I think you might look at it differently entering it. So, and then also it might not shock your system if change does happen. And then, so I think it was more inspired about really wanting to share it with my youngsters and give them a little bit advantage of what could be ahead of them. And yet I'm still experiencing as we go. So it's really it'll be an endless book and an endless story. And what you're doing now is you really are getting people to share what really changed them. It could help with a partnership with whichever partner you have, can help share with them. So it's really, I think a small instance of a group of examples will really make someone think about that change will change you. And maybe you can react to it differently in prep for these to happen.
I love that perspective, because it is just that, because the main themes that I have picked up through what you shared is that one, preparedness of actually it's an inevitable happening, like you are going to change, things are going to change. And I think societally it doesn't really get discussed. It's almost like when you're growing up, there's a lot of change, but then there's almost like this, I'll be happy when, that you'll hit a point when you figure it all out, and then you'll be like, oh. But then I only just realized recently, when we do that, it's like, that's flatlining, i.e. that's death to self. You need to have the ups and downs, because we are designed to evolve, not revolve. So it's kind of that evolution.
Those changes can come at you, or you can make that positive change yourself. You said something very interesting to me in our first discussion. You said you don't know when you've put a ladder against the
wrong wall,
and you've gone up the wrong wall, when you only see that when you get to the top, because you didn't know what it was, but then you make a change. Again, that was coming, even though you thought you were on a trajectory to something which was an ultimate point for you, yet it required change. So if you knew that, you'll now always consider asking yourself a question as you're taking step by step up the ladder to think there could be a change process at the end of this. So yeah, I love that. I think that when you shared that analogy with you, it was just so real, because I think those changes do come possibly in midlife, in your end life, in the beginning of youngsters changing their careers from studying something to changing something else, and they feel there's a crisis around that or consequence. But I think inevitably, if it's taken with a more positive outlook to these, you could minimize the negative impact of consequence if you were just considering it prior to that. And I think that would really help the changes that you do experience if I just knew a little bit about that beforehand.
No, I love that so much. And as you were talking, I thought to myself, that whole ladder analogy of you climb, you invest time, energy, finances, whatever that is, by climbing that ladder. And it could be weeks, months, years, decades. And I think, again, societally, it's almost like, oh, well, and I can think of this relationally, I can think of this career-wise, of you almost talk yourself out of changing, because you're like, well, I've invested so much time, so I might as well just keep going, even though there's a part of you that knows that it's no longer right for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if the other side of this is looking at it twofold. Change can come at you and affect you, or you can affect change. So if you've seen something in someone's day that happened and it changed their lives, you might affect that change sooner. So it preempts you. So when you understand change, then I think you'll understand what to do with it. If you do, like you say, you could have gone those steps halfway up the ladder and realized, hang on a second, if I just look at this, that there will be a change at the end of the ladder, because I will be, for argument's sake, a senior position or something changes. And then I'm going to be required to entertain certain roles or impact certain people. Then I might want to consider that change earlier. So it's a great preemptive understanding change. Having experiential where others have experienced it, you can reflect on that and look at that. And then also understanding where you've just gone through your changes. You might just want to take a look back and just see how you have changed. Because if you know that well, you can share that with partners, with business partners, your relational partners, family, and they'll understand you better. So it really, I just think that understanding change helps you with a lot around you as you're moving forward, because we're all inspired to aspire. But then if you do that, you will definitely come across change points. And I think the ease of it is just to say, well, let's just understand what it is and let's change, and ask and see and look around, and all around you. It's wonderful. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's something to be celebrated. You know, something that came up for me when you were saying that was reflection points. And I don't think, you know, certainly when you're climbing that ladder, right, sometimes you can be so focused on the future state. I'm heading there, I'm heading there, I'm heading there. We're so future focused that we forget to just be present and reflect back over look how far I've come. Absolutely. And then kind of almost take that time for yourself to kind of go, okay, what have I achieved? What am I happy about? What am I not so happy about? Is this still the right ladder? Is this still the right path? And I think for me, speaking personally, I think I lost my sense of self at some point because I was so immersed in the doing and the chase of the destination that I lacked the ability to be present and reflective. And I think that's key, isn't it, to what you're talking about?
Yeah, and I think that change journey is often we sit in mindsets that are rigid. And if a change point comes, it doesn't matter. You can circulate around that and still get back on the journey and the path again. Doesn't mean that the change will be totally disruptive. Whereas a lot of, you know, I know from even just input from when I was younger, family input is that you don't want to change your career. You want to consider traveling the full journey and, you know, acquiring the golden watches, the 30 years. And today, what's happening now, there's a shorter term of it's not loyalty as such, because you're loyal to your business, but you might have a shorter duration, and organizations feel it could be a positive to have shorter duration and turnover to get more excitement in business. It's not necessarily. That's a massive change. So our parents are still talking about, or our grandparents and parents are talking about what that means as a mindset shifted into yours. Now you've got to change that because you've had so much input from family. So that's why your change could also negatively push against family. So if they understand that change aspect in your day relative to the day, there could also be some positive outcomes there as well.
Yeah. No, I love that as an example, because it's funny, you know, a lot of people that I coach, it is around limiting beliefs. And, you know, a limiting belief is only a thought that you consider to be true, that you think over and over and over again until it forms a belief. And, you know, specifically, you know, you brought up a memory for me when I came back from my year out travel, and I worked within a marketing role again, and I knew it's almost like my instinct was so sharpened because of the year out I'd had, that it's almost my intuition was telling me, right, this is not in alignment for you. You need to change, you need to move. And I actually took the decision to leave a job without any other job to go to, because I just wanted to create the space to reflect and to kind of navigate my next step. And I remember both my dad and my sister both saying to me, "Are you mad? You can't get," no, that's right, "it's harder to get another job if you don't already have one."
Yes,
is what they told me. And I remember thinking, is that true? Or is that just a belief that just gets passed down from generation to generation? But the essence of it, it's limiting. It comes from a place of lack and fear, as opposed to a place of possibility and abundance, right?
Absolutely. And that's the rigidity of the traditional outlook. Having that traditional outlook, because it was their experience, then it's passed on, and hence why we get mindsets from others, which we should be forming our own. And then if we open enough, our own mindsets are challenged just by the fact that there will be a change point in front of you. As soon as there's a change point in front of you, we know a mindset can only be shifted by a change point. And either change your mind or something changes it for you.
Yeah. Oh my God. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's not a difficult process that you can communicate for youth, for someone who's at the mature stage of their life and they feel like a change. Of course, it's great. And I'd really like to see it just really get turned on its head, that change is not this negative word at all. It really isn't.
That's this whole mission, right? Is to actually see change as this powerful place of possibility. Because if you think about all of the many variables that you just simply don't know that are out there that you could connect with, you don't know what's going to happen. So I talk a lot about kind of perspective and seeing through your situation through different lenses. And it's funny, I just had a call with a client who's based in Japan last week. And I actually found myself using these very glasses as an analogy, because I have a red frame pair of glasses and then I have these. And she currently lives in Japan. She would love to move to Europe. Absolutely, that's her thing. But she has the belief that, there's fear basically behind making that change, and that she, if it doesn't work out, then what? So I was really, I suppose, sharing the analogy of what would it look like if you changed your perspective from one of fear-based and looking at all of the risks involved to changing your frames to an adventurous outlook.
Sure.
So moving from what's the worst thing that could happen to actually potentially what's the best thing that could happen. Because I think a lot of the time, because of our negative bias that we all have, because we're survival beings, we get trapped in that, don't we?
Absolutely. And sometimes that's one from a personal outlook perspective, but you can be influenced into this as well. And I'll give you an example, which I'm really currently dealing with at the moment, with a company. And also it's a shifting of mindsets, is that this net zero factor that's coming in and how it's impacting people's mental health. And now there's one aspect that everyone is driving to a state which is the net zero 2030. However, it's communicated out of a fear base of the destruction of the world and moving, and so it's impacting people's anxiety levels, because they're nothing. Wow, if that happens by 2030, we're in trouble. So it's a fear-based basis. So it's a negative base to something positively you want to make change on. So we positively want to change the environment and positively want to change the way we deal with our environment for a positive outcome to save the planet. Yet we're doing it out of pushing the fear buttons and the guilt and the corporate's consequences of their businesses and I think that we're actually busy working on that concept now as a value concept, to switch it to a positive basis, like you've just said now with the glasses with your friend, is that if they're looking at it from a point of a positive mindset, it can stimulate a positive mental health, which will then stimulate the environmental processes you want to put in place, and you'll see it from a positive outlook point of view. So even the big factor that's going on at the moment, which is obviously mental health is big at the moment, and also the net zero factors, it can just be changed by, we understand what there is. There's change. We want to go to change to make that. We're responsible. Yet there's also a planetary change and there's human change in this process. So all three of these, if they just shifted that mindset from that negative to positive, then, and this is the preparedness. It's dealing with that individual that says, are my kids actually going to be able to touch the sea, or is it going to be too polluted? Or are there even going to be whales at the end of the day? Or my mental health, will it drive me to impact my family now? All it was at work, they put 3 different new bins that you had to use, but it made such an impact on my day, it created a fear factor. So the changes are always happening around us, and depending on how we look at it with what type of mindset, this is why the inspiration from me was to say, be aware of change, because it will come at you. You will take a standpoint. It will be by basis of your mindset, how you react to it. But knowing a bit about it will give you that ease of mind to possibly be able to address it positively, not necessarily have an anxiety response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. I think it's so powerful, isn't it? Because it just shows, if your example, that it's how many areas that it touches, and that it's not only individual, it's collective. And I think especially, I mean, God, look just at the pandemic, right? And governments and everything. It's, things that are crumbling, things that are irrevocably changing. And obviously, because we are survival, our evolution is come from survival, that we're constantly scanning for risk. And so it is to, and there, you know, this fascinates me even from like a neurochemical perspective, because even if you take the very essence of creativity, right, of being creative, and I think it's funny, I speak to a lot of people that go, oh, I'm not creative, and I'm like, no, everybody is creative. Absolutely. You can basically, it's about having an idea, like everything that exists right now somebody thought of and then brought into being, whether that's a piece of software, whether that's a microphone, whether that, like, whatever that is, you just everybody creates something. And I think, energetically speaking, creativity is following the energy, following the abundant, expansive possibility, and the curiosity, I think, is a key factor in this. You're either judging right, wrong, good, bad, or you're curious and open. So against that rigidity, with curiosity, you're opening up and questioning, is that true? Yes. Could something else be true? What is the story I'm telling myself? I think that's also like pretty huge, isn't it, to kind of really lock onto the curious piece.
I think the point there, curiosity, you know, that the term that the curiosity killed the cat type, and I don't want to bring that analogy. The point is that if you're curious about that change, again, you then are more aware, and you can go into that more aware. So I love curiosity. I think curiosity and creativity go hand in hand.
They do.
And it just means your curiosity, you're going to venture into that, as against the creativity is when you actually, you know, bringing that creative scenario to life. Yeah. But no, I think that they're fundamental in change. And I love that actually point on curiosity, because it would be the type of mindset you would have if you were interested in seeing what that change is about prior to it happening. Yeah, I like that. And there'll be many influences, and I think the more we all realize that the influences can and will change that perspective, you know, the better. I think.
Yeah. I suppose it's ultimately, and I mean, I'm a huge advocate of, you know, you talk about mental health as well, of that curiosity in yourself and knowing yourself at a deeper level. You know, again, you know, speaking to people about their changes, a lot of the people I've spoken to have talked about changes that have taken them through a dark night of the soul, right? At the time, something that actually felt was very painful, or, you know, included loss or massive change. But actually, I think the theme out of all of this is that it's probably the harder changes had the greatest impact.
Most impact, yeah.
Is that something that you found in your life?
Yeah, I think, you know, you don't want to promote that people need to go through a hard time in their life to be able to learn about change. But I would definitely say that the outcomes of the person that embraced change, the person who embraced change will get the most value out of it. And that's, again, the mindset that you have. So if you had a mindset, so again, it comes back to, had I known possibly what that was in somebody else's life, I could apply a process after it happened to me, so that I would get through it and learn more about it. As against, something's happened to me and now it's, you know, I'm the victim of this change. And that's a very different approach to saying, well, I was curious beforehand. I had heard and seen, and I'd felt what it could mean to, and then it happened to me. You'd have a totally different outlook. And I think how you handle that moving forward also would be influenced. So yeah, I do see that by knowing a little bit more and sharing. I think that the sharing of change, if people shared what changed them in their day, what really changed them, you know, what really made them talk differently or walk differently, or share differently, or their partner said, wow, that really, and they're, you know, sometimes the people around you closest to you will see that change, or you just think you're moving on forward. So hear it from where it comes from. It might be your kids that tell you, wow, Dad, you've changed. And you value that, or it might just be a partner. And so I think hearing it and embracing it with a curious mind definitely is a lovely tool. I could love to share with everybody. And there's real truth in this. You just have to ask the very person you sit down and have a coffee with next, and ask the simple question, what change really changed you, and were you prepared for it? So that would be how you gather them. And you just get these classics, like and the more you chat to everybody, the more you hear was that, wow, that really did change you. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And how much richer those conversations are from, talking about the weather or gossiping about things that don't matter. Let's like really find out about how people tick, and actually you might learn something. It's that curiosity again. And I always think that the more curious we are, the less likely we are to be judgmental. And I think it's a muscle that can be strengthened in being more curious, allows us to be more open, and then you end up learning more. And then that's for me, that's the juice of life, right? That's kind of the
and so many people want to share. We're social beings, so we do want to share, and often a lot of, if I look at it from a more of a treatment perspective or a social mental health type perspective, a lot of people use that as therapy to share. So it's definitely used therapeutically as a point of, let me share and tell you what happened in my day, what could be a consequence and how you would want to handle it moving forward. So again, it is that. So it's quite good to actually know more about these changes. So that was the inspiration that I had when I first started. I'm so impressed and so chuffed that you picked up on the concept of moving forward, because I think the more people that share these changes, the more people know about it, the more people will be empowered to be and adapt to the consequences in their day.
Totally, because it is that whole ripple effect of, if we can shift people. Something you said earlier that I just want to touch upon, because I said it to somebody I was coaching the other day, and she picked up on it. And lots of people have probably heard it before, but you could basically have a stimulus and a response. And it's remembering that there is space between the two. So the more aware we can be, the more present in the moment we can be, then we don't have to be reactive. We can actually kind of, perceive that, okay, I am, feeling something from something that's happened or from something that somebody's told me. And I'm going to go into curiosity as opposed to reactivity. And I think that's where the gold is, of helping people become more aware, because then, to your point, you can choose, okay, a change is happening. I have multiple choices how I'm going to respond to this change. I don't have to be governed by my unconscious mind that could very much be a fear place, and I'm just going to be very defensive or react in a certain way. But instead, catch yourself and almost observe yourself and kind of think, oh, that's interesting, that's made me excited, or that's brought fear in, oh, I wonder why that is. And then you can start to kind of learn, right, and evolve through that process.
Absolutely. And you give yourself, I think, a little more time either side, whether it be pre-change or post-change. You give yourself, all you're doing is giving yourself more time. If it's pre and post, you've given yourself double the time.
Yes.
Had it only been post, you're only dealing with that post effect. So if you have had some form of exposure, or you've been curious about it, or you've just looked into something like that, or you've witnessed it through a share, you've got double the time on it. It makes sense that you've got more time to deal with the change, because you've been dealing with it for longer than you think. So you've got that expansion on, which is required when you have those moments, that if change comes, you need that time. Sometimes people say, stop, give it some time and let things develop. It's often what you hear people saying. And sometimes the change is too shocking because I wasn't prepared for it. And this is why we go back to saying that awareness and curiosity can help you.
No, absolutely. Well, it's to build resilience, isn't it? That it's a practice that you can do to actually strengthen that within you. Because it's habitual, and we're all habitual beings, aren't we? So I'm really curious, what would you say, Harvey, is what comes up when I ask, what change have you gone through that you reflect upon and you think, yeah, actually I learned the most through this particular change? What comes up?
I've got a lovely one, which for me is quite personal, but it was when my daughter was born. And I'll tell you why, because instantly I just saw this snapshot of 21 years, and then I saw beyond 21 was walking down aisle, and I suddenly saw all these different events just line up, which I'd never even thought about beforehand. Even knowing that we were having it, and I'd had a son already, when I suddenly, my daughter was born, her name is Gemma, I just suddenly got these, and it changed the way I thought from that moment, from that very moment.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's always been fun. It was a very positive change. It wasn't something that was traumatic,
no,
but it definitely made me take heed and then think, wow, okay. And then it was almost a preparatory for the changes that will come, and the type of events and days. But it was significant. It was very positive. And today I still see that rolling out now, which is great. And it made me think, well, I had seen something of that, and you'd always heard and seen. It's always in your day. But when it really happens, it's going to impact you, and it's emotional. You feel but very positive. I've had various different others that have been positive and negative. I was divorced in 2010, which has got an entire new perspective on how you see change, how you reflect back on all those surrounding you on that basis. So there was a significant point that was in 2010. And that also, I didn't realize what that change would mean from every aspect of my life. So that's why there is a fundamental point when I really started reflecting on this, was in 2010. So that was almost a trigger to take a good look and prepare for what's coming. I was like, okay, what are these change points that are going to be coming up? And I had thought about them before. I just had never taken heed to say, let's look into a little more depth.
Yeah.
But that's where you want to say, right, I need to share this with someone. I've just gone through something and I'd love to share that with somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love the contrast you've given there, because as you rightly say, the change could be a beautiful, uplifting moment of, a new life being born into this world, which, I mean, that's just so beautiful, of just having almost that future type, like all of those future moments that are going to drive you and fill you up and just be so expansive and beautiful. And then that versus a change that potentially is painful. I follow there's a guy who is a Canadian coach, and he specializes in relationship coaching. Mark Groves, Create the Love. If anyone's curious, I'm going to add the link in the show notes. And interestingly, he often talks about culturally that, the shame surrounded by divorce, which is kind of almost, a relationship has failed. And he talked on one of his podcasts, and it just hit me, and I just thought he's so right. He said we should be inviting people who've ended relationships to share their story so we can learn from them, not shun them out of society, but instead say, right, so that broke down. Let's look at why that is. What did you learn about yourself? And actually share that with other people. Because I remember, when I got divorced, there was a huge amount of shame, because nobody really walks down the aisle thinking, oh, well, this might last, but it might not. You want it to last. And when it doesn't, you do reflect on what could have changed, what could have been different. But I think the old way of seeing relationships, that we celebrate through anniversary, the length of them, we don't necessarily celebrate the depth of them. And it's not really, it shouldn't really be a prize that you win for 50 years together, but for a good 30 years, you hated each other's guts. What's the point? Do you know what I mean? So I guess that's, what's your take on, obviously that was something that maybe was quite a change in your life. Where do you sit then with relationship change?
That really helped with me with also talking to other people in their relationships. It definitely made me reflect on, what went down in that period of time, what changed. And you can certainly look at the change points, and they were clear as day. If anyone is really truthful in looking at the relationship, looking backwards on it, they'll see where there's certain points. Two people are different, and you will see that they are also going on a change journey. So one of the points that I'd really liked, that I really wanted to make come out of this entire process you and I have been on this journey, was that be aware that there'll be change in your partner as well. That I found was something really that it might change for me, therefore it was not compatible. And I'm not promoting that, because I've used my instance of divorce to really help others in marriage, and it's really got positive outcomes as well. And I'm really great to share that what I've been through, so that they're possibly more aware of that. So I think it was that I realized, hang on a second, it's not just internalized as in myself that change will come at me, but there's change coming at somebody else that in fact will actually change my day. So somebody else's change is going to impact mine. And that's also the relational component of, and I try and impart some of that info to my kids as well, to say, just know that not only are you changing, but your partner could also be changing as well.
Yeah, which changes the dynamic. And I think and then choosing to move apart doesn't have to be a terrible thing. It can be a very conscious thing of actually, you know what, we want different things, or we are no longer compatible. We were, and now we're not. And that's okay. Rather than demonizing.
And has it changed my mindset about the institution of marriage? No, because I still love it. I think it's fantastic. But there'll definitely be things that I would do differently.
Yeah.
And I would even prompt the conversation of change, even with, you know, when I do intend to partner again. And so from that perspective, it's something to really look forward to and see that change in the other person as well, that they too enjoy their change, you know.
Yes, it's I think it's growing together. It's back on, you know, and I'll share links about Mark Groves, but he talks about relationship being, you know, moving away from codependent, which is when you put your keys of happiness in somebody else's pocket, and sometimes they become, you know, your reason, or, you know, it's their job to make you happy, which should really never be, into that place of actually interdependence of yes, my happiness is my responsibility and your happiness is your responsibility, but how do we help each other grow? And actually it's that mutual love and respect, that it's like, actually, even if we grow apart, your growth is important to me, as is my growth, as opposed to, well, I want you to stay exactly the same since the day I, like, you know, walked down the aisle with you. That's unachievable, really. That's rigidity again, isn't it? As opposed to, well, of course we're going to change because we're designed to change.
And I think the word that you've used a few seconds ago was grow apart. I don't really think it's a grow apart, because you don't want that to happen. It's actually you're going to change. So those changes are happening. Yeah. But if you both, if you can, you mentioned the typical synaptic type process with stimulus and response. There's a synaptic cavus there, like a gap, which you can still cross and it can still be linked. Got to be for that nerve to fire. It's got to be. So you can still keep it. Doesn't have to be a growth apart. Just know that it could be different on either side.
Yes.
And certain changes could affect it slightly differently. But I totally think that can work in any relationship if you understand.
100%. And I think it's back to, you know, because we all see things through our own lens. So the way we're perceiving a situation will be all backed by our experience, our beliefs, all the rest of it. And your partner's is going to be totally different to yours. And I think, you know, I would certainly go back to my past self in my relationship and, you know, be more communicative in terms of, right, okay, let's hear each other, as opposed, you know, to not hearing each other, which, you know, drives indifference and drives separation as opposed to that togetherness. So, yeah, I mean, and let's face it, right? Our existence as humans it's about relating to ourselves, relating to our environment, and relating to everybody that we meet in our lives. And I think there is power in, yes, knowing more about yourself, but power in being curious to kind of go, I don't know this person. I would, you know, I'm curious, I'm open, I'm not gonna, you know, because sometimes we say never judge a book by its cover, right? Actually be able to kind of go, I'm going to engage in conversation. I'm going to ask somebody about their change experience and see what happens. And then it's this beautiful co-creative space.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
change together. What they say, change together.
Absolutely. Well, I have hugely enjoyed this conversation, Harvey. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives, your stories. And yeah, I just can't wait to really have more people share their stories.
Absolutely. Christina, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. I'm inspired that there's others that would take it forward as well, like you have, which is really, really encouraging. And I look forward to hearing and seeing some of the stories as they get published or shared, or however we move that forward in the future. But I'm really excited about it and really inspired to keep on the conversation.
Absolutely. Fantastic.
Thank you very much.